Want to go to Brandon Arnold right now. The other part of the president's remarks earlier, Brandon, as you heard, he's with the National Taxpayers Union, by the way, is that the rich are doing what the rich do, being greedy and selfish and not paying their fair share in taxes, and they're compounding this problem. What did you think of that?
Yeah, this was an absolutely infuriating speech because he blamed absolutely everybody except for himself. It was the meat packers for high food prices, it was the oil companies for high oil prices, and it was the rich, of course, for not paying their fair share in taxes. Of course, one of the reasons why the corporations don't pay as much in taxes as perhaps Biden would like is because of some of his tax policies that have passed on a bipartisan fashion that allow them to drive down their tax liability, particularly in times when we're facing tough economic circumstances, has been the case over the past years for a lot of companies. So that's why a lot of companies aren't paying as much as they'd like. Raising taxes, of course, at this time, at a time when the economy is really struggling, due in large part, of course, to the Biden administration's policies, would absolutely be disastrous and would really, really hurt working Americans.
You know, I'm all for everyone paying their fair share, Brandon. You and I talked about this before. It's just a moving target, what fair share is. It used to be if you got up to 30%, you were paying your fair share. If you got up to 33%, you're paying your fair share. Then 35, 39.6, and in the 40s with everything else. I don't get it. So with the fair share part, I notice it comes back to finding creative ways to come up with more money for Washington, but Washington not equally obligated to come up with saving money for taxpayers. It's just uncanny.
Yeah, I mean, that's the answer. Whenever there's a shortfall in Washington, the answer is to raise more in the way of taxes, raise taxes on corporations, raise taxes on wealthy individuals. Other countries have gone down that path, and what it's done is stifled economic growth. It's a bad formula here. But let's be clear here. Why he's talking about this right now is to distract from the core issue that is really, really hurting Americans, and that is inflation. Your previous guest talked about it in terms of gas prices, but it's across the economy. And he said that there are two main causes for inflation right now, two P's, the pandemic and Putin. What he failed to recognize is there's a third P, and that is the president. The president is in charge of this government. The president has spent like a drunken sailor. This president has spent $2 trillion right off the top of this administration while restricting the amount of gasoline that we can get out of this ground. And therefore, we have this inflationary crisis that he refuses to take any kind of blame for.
You know, looking back in history, and I've raised it with other guests, Brandon, you're probably tired of hearing my saying it as well. It's one thing to sort of deny a problem so you can't address a problem, but it's quite another to point the finger at others for that problem without at least pointing something back at yourself, because he's president, after all. His party has the House and the Senate. He was the one who started saying, much like our Federal Reserve, so no one's Nostradamus here, that this would be a transitory problem. What would kill you to say, I botched that, I got that wrong, I'm not alone, but I botched it? I think Americans are very forgiving, very understanding of presidents who admit a mistake, and very unforgiving of presidents who never do.
Yeah, a little humility would be nice, for sure. I mean, and it's one thing to blame Putin, it's one thing to blame the pandemic, because there's grains of truth to both of those claims. But right now he's blaming Rick Scott. He's blaming the junior senator from Florida for our economic problems because he came up with a plan, in my estimation, a flawed plan, but he came up with a plan to try to address some of our economic problems. He's the junior senator from Florida. Biden is the president. Biden's party controls the White House, the House, the Senate. They can pass virtually any tax or spending bill that they want without a single Republican vote. So the ludicrous nature of this blame game is what is really driving people crazy, what is driving me crazy, because you have to assume at least a little bit of the blame for the mess that we're in right now, and he refuses to do so. Yeah, and you're off to the races once you do, because you're encouraging the other side to find common ground. That's not happening right now. Brandon Arnold, great catching up with you, the National Taxpayers Union representative here. And by the way, he was referring to the junior senator